Hi, everyone. I'm Aurelio Muraca. I'm the technology program coordinator here at the Danbury Library. And on behalf of the Friends of the Danbury Library, I welcome you to our 2024 Western Connecticut UFO Conference. And we're always happy to have, you know, fellow, she's probably the first one. She's the first one to actually start, get together with me. And we started this thing 10 years ago. Linda Zimmermann, who's, without your help and without your knowledge and without your hard work, this really wouldn't have turned out to be nothing. So again, I thank you so much. This is, look at what we've grown here now after a decade. So, and tonight, Linda will be talking about the Danbury Triangle. Basically, something new, but yet something old at the same time too. So without further ado, I present author and researcher and all around, awesome person to be around, Linda Zimmermann.
Thank you, Aurelio. Obviously, there would be no conference without you. I can't imagine what it's like scheduling all this. So, thank you for all your hard work. So, let me jump in, share screen here, and and yes, people are seeing it. You, Aurelio, it's good.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. So, we hear about the Bermuda Triangle and this triangle. Everybody's got a triangle. So I thought it was about time we got our own triangle. So I'm going to be talking about an area between Danbury, Brewster, and Ridgefield. And I'll show that on the map where there was an amazing concentration of sightings over the years. Before I, it's not advancing. Hang on. There we go. Um, for those of you who are interested in this topic, I had written 3 books along the bottom there, and I had enough material for a fourth, and I decided it was time to combine it all. So all of those 3 books plus the new material is in this Hudson Valley UFOs, the best evidence, the big evidence is a little Freudian slip there because it's a massive 8.5 by 11 book, about 500 pages. So I thought it made more sense to have all of the material, all the triangle cases, all the abduction cases in one book. I also am fascinated by animal reactions to UFOs. So, if you're interested in that, I have documented a lot of cases as well as speculated what is the science behind what animals are sensing. They have superior senses in many regards. So, uh, again, if you're interested in this topic, Mike Warden and I have a podcast called UFO Headquarters. We have a lot of episodes. I think we've been doing it 4+ years now, and a lot of them are related to Hudson Valley, Connecticut topics. So, Danbury to Brewster along 84. I wish I had $1 for every witness who stopped their car and watched a massive silent triangular craft over their car or were driving along. For whatever reason, this area was a hot spot among hot spots, mostly in the 1980s, but before that as well. And we can kind of extend that area even further to the south in Ridgefield, which makes a very nice triangle here. And, you can expand those borders out like a lot of things were seen in New Fairfield before they went to Danbury down to Ridgefield or came from Carmel and Mahopac to Brewster, then to Danbury. So, for whatever reason, this is a highly concentrated area of sightings. And I'm going to go over a lot of them tonight. Obviously, I have lists and lists. I sat down a couple of weeks ago and started getting all the Danbury, Brewster, Ridgefield sightings, and I'm like, well, I'll be talking for 7 days on this. So, this is a condensed version, a representative of what was happening and is still happening, I should say. I believe I showed this last year, but there's an update. This was from 1906. I love these early sightings because we cannot say it was secret government projects. Obviously, people weren't even, hardly flying at this point. So the residents of New Fairfield, 5 miles north of Danbury, were startled by the appearance of a strange object in the air, which many thought was an airship. This is important. Nobody's saying, oh my God, it's Martians attacking. They were just curious and fascinated by this. There did not appear to be any persons on board, not like a balloon with like it said, no basket or car suspended. They're trying to use what they know. There's hot air balloons and people get in a basket and hang from it. This was nothing like that. And it said it was first attracted the attention by members of Mrs. O.D., the family of Mrs. O.D. Taylor, by a noise that sounded like an automobile. It went through the air very swiftly and in shape resembled a big naval torpedo. It was near enough to be seen quite plainly. Well, now, what in 1906 was flying through the air that looked like a big torpedo? So I was fascinated by this story. I love scanning old newspapers when I found this. But when I talked about it, I said, is it the truth? I know this is going to come as a shock to many people, but the media isn't always truthful. And particularly in the 1800s, early 1900s, newspapers would make up stories. Was there actually an O.D. Taylor? Was there a house in New Fairfield? And I was thrilled that a lady who was with a historical society, watched the last year's presentation, and she sent me this. Yes, the Oliver Taylor homestead. There most certainly was an O.D. Taylor family, and this is the house. And I guarantee I'll give you $10 if you can find another house from 1906 in the area where they had a UFO sighting. She also sent me this photo. This is the family itself. That's probably Mr. Taylor on the porch there on the right. He had passed away by 1906, I believe, but these other people in the picture, they might actually be UFO witnesses from 1906. So you might hear in my voice, this is exciting because this really sets a precedent of sightings were going on by normal people in normal locations, just going about their business, seeing things in the sky way before there was an Air Force and there were night flights or anything else. So, unfortunately, I don't know if you saw on the last slide, the house did burn down in 1945. But it says if you want to find the location, Route 39 and Milltown Road. So nice elevation there, clear of trees. You can see that if a torpedo-shaped craft was going over, they could clearly see it. So I just want to set the precedent that in the Danbury area by 1906, there were strange craft in the sky. So I'm going to focus a lot on sightings on Route 84. But this came along not too long ago, this case, sighting by Route 84 before it was even Route 84. And this took place on February 4th, 1967, about 2 a.m. You can look this up, Tommy Thurber Lane and Bullet Hole Road in Brewster, New York. I really want to know how Bullet Hole Road got its name. So if anybody knows, please let me know. But two teenage girls are walking along a snowy, it's a very cold, probably in the 20s, crisp, clear winter night. They're walking along a road and they see a light. It doesn't look like a star, it looks too big and bright. And as they're staring at it, it starts to zigzag in the sky from horizontally. And okay, that is definitely not a plane. It's not a star. It's nothing they know. Then it's getting closer and bigger and brighter, and it starts zigzagging from top to bottom. And I don't know what that blue line is on my screen. That's interesting. It's pulsing, and as it pulses and gets brighter, it's getting closer and bigger until finally it's this enormous oval shaped craft. And that's it. Their fascination has now been overcome by fear, and they run home to get the one girl's brother, and because he was in the Air Force, but by the time they come out, the craft is gone. So this brings up, and I really don't know. Can you see that blue line there? I don't know what that is. Can you see that on the screen? Let
Yes,
me
I
go back.
think it's something with your PowerPoint presentation.
It's just gone. I didn't touch anything. I don't know how to get rid of it. So before I lose all my slides, I guess we're going to have to put up with that. I don't know what that is. So this brings up the question, to paraphrase the saying, which came first, the chicken or the egg-shaped UFO? We assume that all of these sightings are along 84 because of 84 itself, that it's a major thoroughfare, and that's what's drawing the craft. But we can't say that because there were sightings along the area of 84 before the road was even completed. And that also brings up a case in Orange County, New York, the Stewart Air Force Base, the Stewart Airport, an enormous amount of sightings since the 40s and 50s up to the present. And you assume it's because these craft are drawn to the airport. Well, I interviewed someone whose grandparents had a farm in the 1880s, and there obviously was no airport, and the family was seeing colorful lights and craft zipping along the fields of their farm. So there's activity in the location of the airport 50 years before the airport was even built. So I'm just bringing this up because you can't always assume that the activity is because of what's there now. It may have been there for a long time. Here's another case of 84 and the intersection of 84 and 684. I've spent a little time sitting there in traffic over the years, as I'm sure many of you have. This was a Sunday afternoon. I highlight that, I italicize that because this is a rare and wonderful daylight sighting. August of 73 along 84. The witness described it as like a 50-gallon barrel, those big drums, but it was the size of a Cadillac, and there were alternating bands of light on it. The top one was rotating counterclockwise, the middle one clockwise, the other one counterclockwise. And it was very low in the sky, very clear to see. So you can imagine on a Sunday afternoon in August, summer traffic, there had to have been hundreds of cars going by that would have seen this barrel-shaped object, no wings, no visible means of propulsion. So very strange things have been going along on 84 uh for many decades, 50, 60 years ago. So that other point in the triangle I mentioned, Ridgefield, Connecticut, this is a case that the witness had told me about a while ago and then recently added something, which I'll show you in the next slide. Again, 75, mid-November, 7:45 to 8 p.m. It's dark by then. Very good witness, clear moonlit night. He and a friend are driving along and they see a group of green lights. And they thought it was a plane going to Danbury Airport, but they were a little concerned because it seemed way too low. And the closer they got, they realized it was two saucers. And he had kind of called it like a teacup on a saucer, like an inverted teacup. But I'll show you a picture in a little bit. Opaque windows. Was able to tell one was about 60 feet in diameter with a brushed metallic underside, like aluminum colored. And the other one was a little smaller. He said about 2/3 the size, 40-foot diameter. And that one was like a brushed copper color. They watched this for 15 minutes. And I say this all the time, when something darting through the air that you see for 10 seconds can really change your life, can change your perception, to witness something like this for 15 minutes and to be as close as 200 feet away from this craft at 70 feet of altitude. That's nothing. Big trees are 70 feet. So you're at treetop level. They're driving along. They see it's sitting basically over a house and a backyard. So they get out and the friend's like, flash your hazard lights on it. Signal it, signal it. Well, be careful what you ask for because he did turn on the flashing lights, the hazard lights, and the craft starts the large saucer starts flashing its lights and moving closer. Um, he used some very colorful language at this point on their reaction to that and realized we don't want this thing getting any closer. So they turned off the hazard lights. It stopped and eventually moved away. So just recently, I had asked for some illustrations, and a picture is definitely worth 1,000 words, and it's worth 1,000,000 words in ufology. And this is what he was talking about with the raised portion in the disc. And he even did the underside. What's very unique, and I can't quite recall this in other craft. Um, at the bottom of each, there was a black circle. Uh, don't know what that was, but he even mentioned that the diameter of the black circle was about the diameter of the superstructure, the raised part on the craft. So fabulous witness. When I am happy to get a picture, a sketch by a witness, I've gotten them on paper plates with crayons and I've been happy with it. But when you can get something like this, it not only helps me enormously, but it helps me tell the story and it helps everyone else to. And I'm sure people are probably in the audience now saying, I saw something just like that. All right, still in the 70s, 1976 was a huge year for not only the Hudson Valley, but in that Danbury Brewster corridor. The end of August, there were a lot of sightings. Danbury reported a lot of colored objects, colorful lights seen over Danbury by numerous witnesses, including state and local police, which we hope are very good witnesses. They should be. Sightings continued from 7 p.m. Monday into Tuesday morning. So we're looking at 10, 12 hours of sightings. I wish I had been there. One police officer said he had photographed the objects and was going to study the film. They did not give a name. I can't try to track him down. I don't know whatever came of that. But also that same night, that 84 corridor from Danbury to Brewster, in Brewster, state police received numerous calls. So for whatever reason, for about a 12-hour period, um, that Danbury Brewster corridor had a lot of witnesses and at least four different objects. So there's a lot of things going on, particularly in the summer of 76, and I'm just highlighting this one in that corridor. So finally, we get to the big wave of the 1980s. The wave, I believe, surpasses all others in all of ufology. If you're not familiar with the Unsolved Mysteries segment of 1992, you should definitely check it out. I think it's on YouTube. They actually did a really good reenactment of craft, these enormous craft hovering very low with people, stopping their cars, getting out. Um, Clearly, we're seeing things were happening in the 70s, but the dam burst, so to speak, December 31st, 1982, when all of a sudden thousands and thousands and thousands of witnesses saw craft like this over the span of 6 years, at least 6 to 7 years. So let me give some examples. That night, the 31st, New Year's Eve, a retired New York Police Department officer in Kent, New York, not terribly far from Brewster. See, he's outside celebrating. It's New Year's Eve. Let's face it, people are drinking, but he's outside because they just bought a new house and he thought it'd be a great idea to smash a bottle of champagne against the house. And he does it, and he goes inside, and his wife is, you did what? And the kids are going to step on that glass. So he goes back out to clean up the glass, and he realizes something is in the sky above him. And it's a boomerang shape, only 500 feet up, enormous, three bright white lights, 15 colored lights, and he hears a slight hum and feels a bit of vibration. A lot of people said the craft was either silent or they weren't, sometimes when you hear a deep reverberation, you're not sure if your ears are hearing it or you're feeling it like in your gut, So it was some sort of slight hum. And it was indeed moving towards 84 because that's what all these craft did. And this man, Ed Hansen, was on I-84 and cars were pulling over. And he's like, well, what are they all doing? And he sees this same boomerang craft. Now it's even lower, 300 feet. That is pretty low for something the size of a football field over your head. It is doing tight circles over I-84. And I don't know if maybe a helicopter can make a tight circle, but they're not silent by any means. And they're not shaped like boomerangs. And it's beaming down a white light. And this is key. I heard this over and over again. He thinks, I wish it would get closer. Immediately it did. I can't tell you how many times there seemed to have been like a psychic connection, telepathic connection between whoever's piloting these things and witnesses. It's moving closer. It has a big, bright beam of light beaming down, which is coming right for him. Suddenly he panics. He's terrified. He's blowing the horn, screaming for it to go away. Remember when I said, be careful what you ask for? Because in the 1980s, at least, you'd ask for something and it might happen. And he also said he had thoughts that weren't my own. That, I don't know about you, but that gives me chills. So there was clearly some sort of mental connection, thought connection at this point. So New Year's Eve, it was seen again all along 84, and that was the kickoff. Another big night was just a few weeks later, a month and a half later, February 26th, 83, in Kent, New York. The witness Monique O'Driscoll uh, did this sketch of the craft, kind of a V shape, modified boomerang. She and her daughter, much to her daughter's dismay, follow it to White Pond. And you can see this is an artist representation. The pond is frozen, the bright lights of this craft reflected. The daughter, Monique is standing by the side there trying to get the best look possible, and the daughter is in the car screaming, "It's going to take you, get back in the car." Well, it didn't take her that we know of, but many, many other witnesses that night. In fact, guess what? In Danbury. So this craft traveled through the Brewster area along Route 84 once again. And this teacher, he was a Danbury teacher, Herbert Proudfoot, was driving along with two air traffic controllers. And they actually pulled off they were driving on 84. They pulled over, got out. A lot of people had, and many, many people called the police. The Danbury police, even though they were witnessing things, were not the most understanding because they told people who called, stable people do not report UFOs. Until the Danbury police had their own sightings and suddenly they were all stable and they didn't care what anybody said. So that was going on, unfortunately, for a long time, and probably still today, people calling about UFOs. I'm sure the stigma isn't completely gone. And I know I've showed Dennis Sant many times, but he's still my favorite witness and one of my favorite people. And his story's just wonderful. He had a amazing sighting, March 17th, 1983. The sightings were so incredible by that point that this man, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, came to interview Dennis and other people because he wanted to know what was it about this Danbury Brewster corridor in this area that so many UFO sightings were taking place. Here I am with Dennis 30 years after he had his experience. He's in our film. If you're interested, you can see him telling his story in his own words in the film In the Night Sky, which is available for free on YouTube. He saw something like this directly over Route 84. His house was below an overpass to 84. He stood out there watching it, and he saw that all these cars were stopped on 84. In fact, there was a truck. This is another interpretation of the craft. It got so low over the truck, beaming a light on it. At first, the truck driver was fascinated, and then he said, "Oh, the heck with this." It was getting uncomfortably close, and he took off. But several people told me the craft was so low, if they had a baseball, a tennis ball, a rock, they could have thrown it and hit the craft. So we're not talking about tiny little, mysterious lights in the sky. We're talking about in your face, over your head, massive craft, and everyone stopping to get out to look at it. This is where he was standing in his backyard as he was looking at the craft over 84. You can see he's pointing to it. And guess what? He said, "Oh, I wish it would get closer so I could get a better look." And don't you know, it immediately started moving towards him and hovered directly over him here in his backyard. And just to add to this whole 84 Carter, sightings that night also took place in Danbury and New Fairfield, Connecticut. And we're not talking one or two people, we're talking hundreds. Some of these sightings along 84, estimates of maybe 5,000 witnesses. And when you consider this happened night after night for almost 6 or 7 years, you do the math. It's remarkable. Another Danbury sighting just took place a week later. An IBM executive, so probably wasn't in his best interest to talk about UFO sightings. But since everybody else was, people felt emboldened to tell their story. Massive craft. He said this thing must have been larger than a 747, and it just hung in the air. I love this, like it was tied to a string. And I've heard that a couple of times. In fact, you may or may not be familiar that Muhammad Ali had a couple of sightings. He used to jog late at night, early in the morning training, and he had several. Of course, he was punched in the head for a living, but he did have legitimate UFO sightings with other witnesses, and he used that same line. A craft was hanging above him like it was tied to a string. So these things, despite the wind, the weather, whatever conditions, could sit in the sky perfectly motionless. That same night, the 24th, it was also seen along the Taconic Parkway. It was actually this night, it was a 45-mile stretch between Eastern New York and Western Connecticut. Almost a year later to the day, there was another massive boomerang, a V-shaped or boomerang. It was at an altitude of only 600 feet, making very, very sharp turns. At 8, this was documented. It was sighted 8:20 p.m. out in Yorktown, New York. And then at 9:30 p.m. From Kent to Danbury. And guess how it got there? Through Brewster along the I-84 corridor. I wish I could. I'm sure there's a lot of people. Well, why the I-84 corridor between Brewster and Danbury? And my succinct answer is I have no idea. Um, for whatever reason, this was an area of great interest. So that same Danbury police force, who were champions of new and exciting knowledge, told witnesses who called this night, "Okay, go sleep it off and the pink UFO will go away." And one of their other witty retorts was, "They can't be UFOs because they don't exist." So again, they were to have the whole department, basically, including the chief, was to have very intense sightings, and suddenly they were all believers. So I've talked a lot about triangular UFOs, even barrel-shaped UFOs. The bulk of the sightings were about a third boomerang, a third triangle, about 20% V-shaped, and then there was a small group of unusual ones. And this is a sketch someone made for me who had a sighting in Danbury in the early 1980s. Rectangular, very big, bright lights. And the description was like girders, I've heard like the underside of a bridge, the steel beams and girders. Many people said it was like the craft was made out of an erector set. What is that? I mean, it doesn't sound very airworthy. It doesn't sound like something you want to fly through outer space or bring in through the atmosphere. But I heard this time and again, things the size of a football field that looked like it had been made by an erector set. And hopefully everybody remembers erector sets. If they don't, you can Google it. It was a toy that had these little metal pieces you put together into all sorts of projects. Okay, so a triangle in the triangle. So the whole idea of the Danbury Triangle is kind of a double entendre because there were obviously a lot of triangle sightings in this triangular area. And one of my favorites was around 1984. Jerry and Mike were driving west on, of course, I-84. They were going from the Danbury Hospital to Brewster. About 10 p.m., overcast. And sometimes when it's cloud cover, there's a slight glow to the clouds from light pollution, all the street lights and apartment building, all the light pollution gives a little glow to the clouds. And I thought this was a great line. If it had been clear, they don't think they ever would have seen the craft. The only reason they saw it was a solid black triangle with no lights. The only reason they saw it because that backlit overcast. Some of the words large, no visible signs of propulsion, no exhaust, no propellers, very low. It's just you can take these words and, switch them out with just about 95% of all the other witnesses. And they're driving along. Hopefully the statute of limitations on speeding has has gone because they said they were going about 80 miles an hour and the craft was low, staying just ahead of them, keeping pace. It's one thing to see a craft. It's even more unnerving when the thing seems to be going along with you, not following you in a sense, just ahead of you. They finally pull off an exit and stand and watch it. Somebody else, another motorist had pulled over and got out. And this was common. Groups of people, strangers, just standing there in awe and usually in silence watching this craft. And then of course, we all watched the craft head toward Ridgefield. Again, that third point in the triangle, the Brewster Danbury Ridgefield. Again, I don't know what that is, but so many of these craft seem to be coming or going from that area. All right, I have to bring up abductions. People are usually very interested in it. Some people don't want to hear about it. So cover your ears if you don't want to hear this one. I won't get into a lot of them tonight, but since this one involves I-84, I'm going to mention it. Began in Danbury. Now, I put an asterisk by July 11th, 1985, because the witness could not recall the exact date. She said, June or July of 85. And how I was able to pinpoint it to July 11th, she said she was on her way to Hartford for I hope I pronounced this right, Yngwie Malmsteen concert. And I was like, a what? He was, I believe, a Swedish guitarist. He's still heavy metal, hard rock, still playing. And wouldn't you know, on Yngwie Malmsteen's website, I found a list of all the concerts he's ever given. And lo and behold, July 11th, 1985 was when he gave the Hartford concert. So I love being able to pin these things down. I once was able to pinpoint one witness's sighting because he mentioned he was watching a particular hockey game. And I was able to check the schedule for that year and find out which night that was. So 7:30, still quite light. on a July 11th evening, and she should have gone to I-84 and gone east on 84 to Hartford. But as she's making her way to 84 around Federal Road, she sees a group of lights that just fascinate her. So she follows them in the wrong direction from where she's trying to go. She goes west on 84 at that point, and she pulls over with another car at the Lake Avenue exit, gets out. Massive black gray triangular craft. She described these massive giant round lights, and again that slight hum. So she thinks she's standing there with this other witness for maybe 10 to 20 minutes. This is interesting. She cannot recall getting back into her car and then driving east to Hartford. She remembers getting to the concert, but the guitarist had already finished. The concert was over. It should have been only an hour drive. It was much longer than that. There is definite time missing here. She was clear. She didn't do drugs. She didn't drink. And then she can't recall driving home either. So this was more than just, I had a sighting, I saw a craft. Um, this is, I think, a lot more. She was very shaken up, agitated. She didn't know why. She couldn't figure out what had happened to her. And this is very interesting. Haven't quite heard this before. She said whenever she tried to tell people about this sighting, her phone would ring, she'd pick it up, and there would be an angry buzzing sound, which she took to be like a warning, like she shouldn't be talking about this. She said even when she went down to Savannah, Georgia, to school, to college, and she'd try to talk about it, her phone would ring and there'd be that buzzing sound. This really goes into even more amazing realms of bizarreness. And not surprisingly, her sister and several of her friends had also had missing time over the years. We see this time and again, that family groups, close-knit groups of people, um, are abducted all at once or throughout the years. It's multi-generational. So I thought this was a good representative of basically probably abducted right off of I-84 in Danbury. So if you're driving home tonight, keep that in mind. It's a chilling thought. It's definitely a chilling thought. So one more a witness I want to talk about. We'll just call him Jake. He's a typical family man. He raised 5 successful children, was successful in his career. Um, and he had a couple of sightings, which I'll get to in a minute. And I thought, Aurelio, you should be happy to hear this, that someone gave him the Danbury News Times article talking about our 2016 UFO conference. And that's what made him want to contact me. And he said at that point, he felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders because he realized after all these years, he could talk about this and not be ridiculed. Sighting number 1, Ridgefield, Connecticut. What a surprise. Summer of 83, about 10:30 or 11 p.m. He and 2 friends, Pam and Jill, see lights coming from the direction of Danbury. Again, the Danbury Ridgefield connection. He said it was gigantic, the size of a city filled with white lights, thousands of white lights. And he described it as a city of lights, which is exactly the term Dennis Sant used. It was a city of lights. And it didn't move conventionally by any means. He said it was there, and then it was gone, and then it was there, and then it was gone. It would basically, in a blink, be somewhere else and then go back. And it was jumping across the sky, and they watched it for 20 minutes. So Jake and Pam were mesmerized, enthralled by this. And he said Jill was nothing short of hysterical, begging to go home. She was hysterical the whole way home. She was traumatized by this. But Jake said, I was mad when it was gone. It's hard to describe how drawn to it I felt. Again, witnesses have this connection with whatever it is. This goes so much deeper than I saw some lights in the sky. Apparently, both the Danbury News Times and the Ridgefield Times had articles about it. I'd love to find both of those articles from this summer of 83, that this massive craft was seen over the whole area. It was also seen over a local prison, and the terrified inmates were begging to be let out of their cells. It's one thing to see a craft, but you're locked in a cell, and this thing is over you. You don't know what it's going to happen. That had to be terrifying. Sighting number 2 began in Ridgefield and was going towards Peach Lake, which is the next town over for Brewster, basically right along the line of that Brewster, Ridgefield, Danbury triangle. Again, it's 83. Jake is with his girlfriend driving a Volkswagen on Route 116. They were headed for a liquor store in Peach Lake. But he made it clear they had nothing to drink yet because they hadn't gotten to the liquor store to have anything to drink. And he said suddenly the sky was just blacked out. He gets this feeling. They look up. There's a massive silent black triangle above them, and it is keeping pace directly over their car for miles. They're terrified. And this is very chilling. He said it felt like we were being scanned. It was like the scan started at the front of the car, moved across the hood, through us, and out the back. I felt really bad, weird. He said it was like a tingling sensation as this scan moved through him. He didn't like it because he had no control. This was whatever was happening was some sort of invasive scan. They were checking him out. Um, Both he and his girlfriend are terrifying. His girlfriend is crying. And I love little details like this because it really brings the truth and the immediacy and the intensity of the sighting. He said mascara was running down his girlfriend's face. And if you're making up a story, that's probably not a detail you're going to add. And it just shows how traumatized this poor girl was. One more sighting, Ridgefield to Danbury. So we're getting all the arms of the triangle here. Now we're in the summer of 89, and Jake is with his girlfriend, then wife, Emma, and they're driving from Ridgefield to their home on Mill Plain Road. I just heard another case on Mill Plain Road. Um, I just found it today. So another hotspot near 84. They see lights in the distance, then a massive black triangle once again by the ramp at I-84. They pull down a dead-end street a couple of 100 feet to get a better look, and the craft moves straight towards them. And he says, it was weird, but it seemed to know we were there and came right over our car. I went to get out, but Emma kept telling me not to. But I had to. I had to get out. I didn't even care if it was going to take me. It was just so amazing, a spiritual thing. this happens. It's rare, but again, this deep connection. And I love this. I guess the spell was kind of broken when another man pulls over. He gets out, sees the triangle, and says, "Holy blank!" And he took off. So again, very different reaction. One man, it's a spiritual, deep connection thing to him. The other one wanted no part of it. And as this grown man, father of 5 children, successful businessman, is telling me this part of the story, he bursts into tears. He is sobbing, and I'm like getting choked up. These, I can't impress upon you enough how affected deeply people were by these encounters. It's a facet that you can't document, you can't quantitate. There's no instruments to measure it, but these are deep mental, emotional, and sometimes spiritual encounters. And I'm a stranger to this guy, and I feel honored and privileged that really this man felt comfortable enough to start crying, because just telling of uh these encounters was such an amazing part, an important part of his life, and still obviously is to this day. These are not things you see and forget. And I said, given how deeply affected you are by this, all these 3 sightings, how do you feel? What would you say now, all these years later? He didn't hesitate. He said, "I am so lucky. A lot of people don't get 1 sighting. I got 3." So he looks back on this as something fabulous. And it all took place in this Danbury Triangle. So to summarize, not just lights in the sky, massive craft that you can hit with a baseball so low, deep, profound, life altering experiences, some sort of special connection. I don't know what it is. It's different for all, and not everybody had it. Some people jump back in their car and run screaming from it, and other people could stand there all night long and can't wait for it to happen again. So, if you want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with me. I have Hudson Valley UFO's Facebook page. And again, if you're interested, I have a lot more cases I talk about on UFO Headquarters, the podcast. You can get it Apple, Spotify. I don't even know how many places you can get it. But that's the Danbury Triangle. So I would be happy to answer any questions there might be if we still have a few minutes.
Yes, we do. I would recommend that anyone who has any questions.
You're muted, Aurelio.
If anyone has any questions, please type it into the chat and I will relay it to Linda. This has been, wow, one heck of a presentation.
I
So
hope you're not scared to drive on 84 at night now.
no, aside from Jake, I lived all my life and I still haven't seen one.
Oh,
If there's something, something periphery, something in the sky that was stationary and it was gone, it could have been, a satellite or what have you, but nothing as profound as seeing a gigantic, flying V or triangle in the sky that would block out the sky and, lights and everything. Nothing like that, nothing that profound. So I'm
yet,
still waiting.
yet.
So let's see. We have one question from Stacy. If one can wish the craft would get closer and it does, can one wish it to go further away? Have you heard anything regarding that?
Yes, the cases I mentioned, Ed Hansen, who it was coming closer, and because he wanted to, And then he freaks out and he's blowing his horn, get away, get away. And it did move away. Even Dennis Sant, who said, I wish it would come closer, it was, and it was getting so close and so low. He was kind of nervous and he's like, what if it lands? What, my kids are in the house. And he got anxious about it and nervous. And when he got fearful, it stopped and moved away. So, yes, it does seem to know when you want to see it and when you don't. Not always. Sometimes it'll just come and go right over you, whether you're screaming or not.
Mhm.
But if you have that connection to it, it seems to work both ways, coming and going away.
Yeah. Um, from Donna, I read many mediums also have come from this area. I was born and raised in Torrington, and in 1969, when I was 8 years old, my brother, my sister, and my brother, and I saw the UFO from the Tom Reed incident. Wow. It
Oh,
hovered over my house, and that was the start of my journey. Wow,
we
holy
we need
smokes.
that documented. We need that documented as part of the that
Yes.
night.
Donna, if you could contact Linda, I know we will have Tom Reed next week. Please, if you haven't, register danburylibrary.org on the main page. Go to the UFO conference, register for Tom Reed's UFO presentation that's happening next Wednesday. I think you may want to tell them that because that is something that I have
Abs-
not heard. There's one of the great things about Tom's experience is that he wasn't the only one. He had multiple people. It was not only him, his brother, his grandmother, his mom taken. There were multiple people taken in that area, and there were multiple eyewitnesses, including fire department, police, and radio station. I mean, he'll talk about it during his presentation and everything. But it's certainly one of the most unique, off-world, as he likes to call it, experiences. That's I think um, been recorded in UFO lore.
yeah, Aurelio, feel free to give her my email.
Certainly, certainly. This is from Marguerite, the gentleman who said thoughts are not of his own. Did he elaborate what the thoughts were? And was that the only person you interviewed had that type of experience?
No, quite a few people had almost the identical experience. A lot of it was don't be afraid, and I think a lot of it he wasn't even able to process what was happening, but he just felt that something obviously was in his thoughts, in his mind, and that was about as much as he elaborated. I think fear took over and couldn't think clearly at all at that point.
I
But
think
yeah,
I had a conversation with a coworker today, and I was explaining to her and about uh, the aerial school incident in Zimbabwe in the 90s, where Dr. John Mack went out to see if it was a case of mass hysteria. He was a Harvard psychiatrist, Pulitzer Prize winner. He said it was not, it was an actual, real event experienced by like what, 30, 40 children. And the beings were outside of the craft, broad daylight during recess, and they communicated with them telepathically. And they said a lot of it was, the thoughts were not their own. They were trying to relay a message to the children that had a lot of ecological ramifications to it. But that is the only other one that I can think of where it's like, hey, they're talking to me. Their lips are not moving. My lips aren't moving, but I'm seeing pictures. It's not for me. And multiple people, everybody who was present was thinking the same thing.
yeah, and a lot of it is trying to prevent you from coming closer in some cases or taking a photo. I've interviewed many people who said they saw something, they were going to run towards it, or they're going to grab their camera, and suddenly in their head, you can't do that. You can't get closer. It's dangerous if or you just can't do that. And then later on, after the experience, they're like, I, why did I think that? It was like these thoughts were put into their head to keep
Yeah.
them away and to not photograph the craft.
Uh-huh. We have another question from Deidre. Has anyone ever witnessed a small green triangle near a power source and then disappeared?
Small green triangle. Not to my knowledge. But it sounds like there's a story in that that I might want to hear. Certainly a lot of things around Indian Point nuclear power plant, other in the Hudson Valley, and other um, energy producing locations. Some massive triangles over Indian Point in 84.
Yeah, they have a keen interest in, yeah, nuclear
Mm-hmm.
facilities.
Mm-hmm.
As we're now, you know, been hearing in a lot of these hearings with Congress. A question from Bill. I'm 68 now. I was in my 20s and I saw the triangle, I believe in March in 84, three lights hovering on Clapboard Ridge Road across from where he lived in Hillcroft Apartments off of exit 5 on 84. So
Oh,
there you go. Another corroborating
excellent.
witness.
Yes. Yep. Another 84 area witness. Definitely.
A question from Myra. What UFO events are still going on in this area?
Uh, there seems to be something going on a lot. You can check the New York State MUFON, gets a lot of reports. In fact, I should point out they need field investigators. So if you are very interested in this, New York in particular could use more investigators because they can't keep up with all of the cases. Still triangles, more of smaller triangles in the area. Um, a lot of orbs, the basically balls of light that seem to move intelligently. I'm trying to think of the most recent case. But yes, you name it, it's still happening, just not with the frequency. Nothing was like the frequency of the 1980s.
Yeah, I agree. That was like an anomaly.
Yeah,
Really, it's like having the Phoenix lights going on for like 4 or 5 years.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
that
And if
was on a, a unique, where case where, again, thousands of people saw a
Mhm,
gigantic triangle over their head.
right.
A question from Frank. Is it true that UFOs are attracted to bodies of water and iron mines in Carmel and Brewster? I think Phil Ambrogno had this theory. I don't know if you can,
Bingo.
you can
Yes.
expand on this.
Yes.
Something
Oh,
you know.
so many cases of craft coming in and out of the water in those areas, the lakes, hovering over the water, pulling water out of the lakes. And a lot of it, that magnetic mine road, the all the old magnetite mines, a lot of activity in those areas. So clearly they were drawn to those areas. Is it the magnetic fields? Is it the minerals? Maybe they can somehow utilize the magnetic fields there, which are unusual, and then absolutely the water. It's like hand in glove with the UFOs in this area with the lakes and bodies of water, even the Hudson, in and out of the Hudson.
We have another question from Scott. I'm 44 and I live in New Milford. I have had many sightings along the New York border, especially back in the mid 80s. Um, and that was it.
Oh no, that's great. That's what we
That's
want to hear.
if there's any way, like if you had many sightings, Scott, I would say maybe reach out to Linda if she can
Hmm.
uh, you know, get down those dates, and maybe those dates corroborate with other sightings
Mhm.
that you have in your database, Linda, because I think that would be great to have, and you've been doing this, just, hey, on this date, this is how many sightings, and we've been getting all
Mhm.
these witnesses and everything.
And
Any little bit helps.
it's a lot of people say, "Oh, you probably don't want to hear another triangle sighting." Yes, I do, because you never know. You might have a slightly different perspective, or they're all different. They're all different. So you might have seen some unique feature, had some unique experience. So yeah, it's like a big crime scene. You never, well, we don't need that evidence. Yes, you want all the evidence you can get your hands on.
Does anyone have any more questions before we call it a night? Because this has been a great presentation again, with you, Linda. It's always awesome to have you, as part of this UFO conference, and also exploring and expanding upon what's happened here in Danbury, because it really has, raised a lot of questions over the years. And one of the primary reasons why we have this UFO conference is to offer some answers and some explanation, and also to ease some, some people's worries about they're the only ones, like Jake, who you
Yeah.
spoke about. That is, if something like that, like he's relieved. That is, there's other folks who can come forward and, tell their story and get some sort of solace and peace. That's all what we're here for.
Definitely. And if anybody has any other, I'm very curious what it is about Danbury as well. I'm curious about the Danbury Brewster uh, Ridgefield, but if anybody knows of anything unique in that triangular area or has more sightings, I'd love to hear them.
And please do not hesitate to email me directly, um, or Linda. If you can't get Linda's email, please email me and I'll be happy to give it to you.
Yes, and thank you again, Aurelio, for all your work.
Thank you. And thank you, Linda, for all your work as well. And your dedication. And please, continue. The UFO conference here at the Danbury Library continues. Be sure to register for Tom Reed's um, presentation next week. Okay, so until then, have a great night.